Is microdosing magic mushrooms just one big hoax? Well, we're going to talk about that today on Microdose U. There are definitely things people are saying, and I'm going to bring those up, and we're going to talk about all of these. And by the end of the show, we will absolutely have an opinion on whether this thing is real, microdosing magic mushrooms. Does it really do something? Does it help? Or is it potentially just one big hoax? So let's get right into them. I've got a bunch of notes. I will be reading sometimes because I just want to make sure I don't want to miss anything. It's such an important topic that I'm going to make sure I don't leave anything else. So one thing people are saying is, okay, yeah, microdosing, it's just a big placebo effect. Well, is it or not? Placebo is real. There's something to a placebo effect that is real, and some actual real true pharmaceuticals work partially on placebo effect, but that doesn't mean that microdosing doesn't work. Studies suggest even small amounts of psilocybin absolutely enhance brain connectivity and neuroplasticity, leading to real changes in mood, cognition, and behavior. So if it were only a placebo effect, we wouldn't see consistent reports of benefits across thousands of users from all types of different backgrounds. So I'm going to go ahead and dispel that, although there might be a component of placebo, just long-term placebo wouldn't hold up. There's just no way it would. Number two, some people say there's no solid scientific evidence that proves microdosing really does work. What I would say is, and I've looked into all this, research is definitely ongoing. Early studies from institutions like Johns Hopkins and Imperial College in London have shown promising effects of psilocybin on depression, anxiety, PTSD, cognition, and a lot more. And just because large-scale clinical trials haven't reached final FDA approval, it doesn't mean that microdosing magic mushrooms doesn't work. Many now accepted treatments took years to gain like traditional or mainstream recognition. Think about that. So, I mean, look, you might say, well, I want to wait until all these studies are complete. Well, good luck on that because you'll probably be waiting. You could be waiting decades. And personally, I don't want to wait decades. Number three, if you're not taking a macrodose, if you're not taking enough magic mushrooms or psilocybin to go on a full psychedelic trip, it's not doing anything at all. Well, psilocybin interacts with serotonin receptors. Even at microdoses, it affects mood, focus, and emotional regulation. Many substances actually do work in small doses. Think of aspirin for pain or low dose lithium for mood stabilization. You don't need to trip for psilocybin to take an effect. So after having microdosed for 4 years now, I would disagree with what these people are saying. It's simply not true. Psilocybin has changed my life over 4 years of microdosing, and I will absolutely stick to that. Now, I'm not against taking large doses. I'm not against that, but that doesn't mean that microdosing does not work. Okay, here's a great one that I'm going to dispel really quickly. People are just looking for an excuse to take drugs. These people are just drug addicts disguised as somebody taking plant medicine. Well, if people want to get high, they would take larger doses. Microdosing is about functionality. It's about changing the neural pathways of your brain. It's not about intoxication necessarily. Many people who microdose are professionals, parents, individuals seeking mental health support. And these people aren't interested in partying and getting wasted and getting stoned and going on psychedelic trips. They're interested in changing the way they feel every single day. And by the way, the same argument was once used with cannabis for medical use. I mean, cannabis has been proven to work for medical use, but many people have said in the past that it's only for stoners. It's simply not true. Okay, here's another thing that people are saying. It's magic mushrooms are dangerous, and we don't know the long-term effects. What I would say to them is psilocybin has a long history of safe use Current research suggests it has an excellent safety profile with low toxicity. And actually, unlike pharmaceutical drugs, psilocybin it's not addictive and no withdrawal effects. And you can't overdose. I mean, could you go on a crazy, wild, long psychedelic trip if you took too much? Absolutely. But there's no danger in actually overdosing and and it killing you like a lot of other drugs. It's not in that category. I would argue that it's actually a very, very safe substance. I would say it's safer than alcohol. And why is alcohol so widely accepted by everybody? People look down on those of us that might be taking psychedelic drugs for our medical health, but in the same breath, they're sipping on their alcohol. I would argue that this is just not right. Next one. This is, I don't know, I shouldn't even, this is crazy, but since people do say this, it's illegal. You can get arrested. You can go to jail in most places. Well, that is true. But okay, this is changing now. Cities like Denver, Oakland, states like Oregon, Colorado have already decriminalized or legalized psilocybin therapy. And many more states and jurisdictions are following suit on this. Unfortunately, as same with cannabis, the laws often lag behind science. Just because something is illegal doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It doesn't mean that it's ineffective. Cannabis was illegal for decades, despite its proven medical benefits. I mean, people were getting it on the, open black market because it made them feel better and it was improving their health in some instances, in many instances, I should say. So the fact that it's illegal does not take away from the fact that it absolutely is a plant medicine that needs to be taken very seriously. Okay, so here's another one. There's no way to measure the dose precisely. Well, it's true that and I've talked about this on my show many, many times. It's true that dried mushrooms can have slight potency variations. If you just take a big bite out of a mushroom, and even if you weigh it, this psilocybin is distributed differently throughout the mushroom. That's why I've always said to you to make sure you use dried mushrooms that are ground up, and in that way, the dosing will be more consistent, I should say. Is it a perfect science? No, it's not. But the other thing is it's a microdose. And when you're doing a microdose, it's not going to matter that much if if you take 100 milligrams, 125, 90, it's not going to vary that much. So again, it's not an exact science, but again, it is a microdose and it does not have to be an exact science. Oh, the next one that people are saying, oh, microdosing is just a trend. It's a fad. People are doing it to be cool, but it's going to go away. Well, first of all, just saying that has no bearing at all on whether microdosing is effective, whether it's a hoax, whether it works or doesn't work. You can say anything you want and you can believe it's a fad or not. But here's the reality. The use of psychedelics for healing, this is nothing new. This goes back thousands of years. So it's not some new fad. Indigenous cultures have used these for long periods of time. Modern research is validating what they already know. They've known for centuries. These substances have profound healing potential. And unlike short-lived wellness trends, psychedelics are gaining traction in scientific research. I think they're getting more popular. More people are knowing about them. They're not going anywhere. They're not going away. This is absolutely not a fad. Okay, here's a great one. If this really worked, if psychedelics really worked for microdosing for mental health, big pharma they'd be all over this. They'd be controlling it. Well, actually, pharmaceutical companies are, good or bad, pharmaceutical companies are getting involved. Companies like Compass Pathways, MindMed, they're developing psychedelic medicines. The reason psychedelics aren't widely prescribed yet is because they aren't easily patentable in their natural form. It's a plant, which makes them less profitable for big pharma companies. But history shows that many natural treatments, cannabis, turmeric, meditation, were ignored by big pharma for years before actually being validated by science. Okay, and here's a great one. Again, it just some of these things just make no sense to me whatsoever. But people that are against it, they're going to be against it, and they're going to just come up with reasons why it's no good, doesn't work. So here, this I love this. Well, if microdosing really works, why can't I just microdose any medication? Well, not all substances work in microdoses. Many medications have like a minimum effective dose. You can't just take like a tiny little speck of aspirin, I'm just using that as an example, and expect that to relieve your pain. I mean, people do take smaller doses of aspirin for heart health, but there's a limit to how low you can go sometimes. Psilocybin's mechanism of action is unique. It promotes neuroplasticity and emotional regulation even at very, very small doses. Compared to caffeine, like taking a little bit of coffee, a few sips of coffee, well, that might give you a tiny boost in alertness. It could, but taking a tiny dose of aspirin or ibuprofen, like a little speck, it's not going to relieve your pain because its mechanism requires a certain threshold to be effective. So the fact that psilocybin works at sub-perceptual levels makes it unique compared to most pharmaceuticals. And I personally think that's a plus because most pharmaceuticals do require a higher dose to have an effect. I've given you a bunch of arguments against psilocybin and why it doesn't work, why microdosing is bullshit, why it's a hoax. But if you look at all these together and you look at the reasons I've just given you that these are just simply not true, and the fact that so many of us, including myself, and I know that the fact that I've microdosed for 4 years, that's not a scientific study, that's an anecdotal story. I share my story with you. But if all these things were true, that microdosing is a hoax and it doesn't work, explain, just explain why I feel totally different after having microdosed for 4 years. You can't just make this up. You can't just blink your eyes and say that I'm doing something that's not working, but it makes me feel totally different over 4 years. It just, again, a placebo effect could work for a short period of time, perhaps, but taking someone like me, and we've got so many other examples, people that I've worked with over the 4 years, people that we've coached, people that I've spoken with, people in our groups. It would be too coincidental and too anecdotal for people to say this just doesn't work, this doesn't make sense. It's not like that. It absolutely does work, and there are studies that do show that microdosing magic mushrooms, or really any psychedelics, but this is mainly about magic mushrooms. Lately I have been talking about microdosing LSD a little bit more, and I will continue that as well. But my conclusion is it is absolutely not a hoax. If somebody is telling you that, do not listen. They just need to be educated. To be kind, they need to be educated a little bit more. If you like what you're hearing or seeing here, I really encourage you to share, like, subscribe, comment. If you're here on YouTube, the comments really help. I try my best to respond to every comment I can. There's show notes in every episode, as well as my website, microdoseu.com. That's microdose with the letter U on the end of it. Brand new episode every Wednesday. And we're having a lot of fun over on Patreon, talking about some of the things that I just don't really talk about that much in the podcast itself for various reasons. And I did that episode a short time ago on microdosing LSD. And if you're curious, if you want to check it out, it's right here pointing to it on YouTube. And if you're not on YouTube, if you're on Spotify or Apple, check it in the show notes. I'll give a link to it. Till next time, I'm Dr. Dave. I do love you.